That was certainly a great talk. It was very engaging. I just wanted to thank you once again for being with us this evening. We've obviously run close to 8 o'clock. The room is still booked for quite some time right now, so we can stick around and have some questions and answers, some discussion, and kind of open it up. But I know that we originally scheduled to finish at 8 o'clock, so if you do need to depart, feel free. But yes, once again, thank you very much for your talk, and thank you to everyone for coming this evening. For the Q&A, if necessary, if you want to ask a question in Mandarin or Cantonese, I'm sure we can provide a translation. But feel free, English, Cantonese, Mandarin, we can really open up the discussion. Thank you very much. Ben, why don't you start?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Lian, for your insightful talk. You talked about how the supply and demand of autonomy, if the new sovereign is equally politically benign, it will alleviate the problem. So is the current case of Hong Kong a case of bad emperor problem, which will start to the separatist sentiment start to fade with better policy or more soft-handed policy from either Beijing or their chief executive in 2017.
I understand you correctly. The Hong Kong government pursues if the Hong Kong government pursues a more even-handed, soft policy approach, would that make the situation better and perhaps stop the separatist sentiments in their tracks, right? Now, I think the experience of the people in Hong Kong has been rich enough to understand that it is not a matter of being soft or hard, but it is a matter of whether the government would make good its promises to the people of Hong Kong as stated in the basic law, namely high degree of autonomy, and Beijing would keep its hands off except on the issues of diplomacy and national security, and that there would be full and genuine universal suffrage and full democracy, plus Hongkongers rule Hong Kong, right? So, if these promises are kept, then their demands would be met, and then there would be no social movements or whatever, as you have witnessed in Hong Kong. So, the soft approach probably would not solve the problem. It has to be real deeds. Okay? The government has to show a genuine desire to just keep their promises. Okay?
So if we have a 228 type event, as Dr. Lian projected, wouldn't there be a really great financial or political consequences that happen that will force the Chinese government to appease with the Hong Kongers? Are they just bluffing us, or what chips do we have as Hong Kongers?
So is that the economic implications or political implications?
First of all, we hope that it wouldn't be as bad as that. Now, personally, I am still a little bit optimistic for the following reason. Hong Kong is an important financial center, right? Now, the important thing to note is that this financial center has become very important to China, especially to the elite of China. Right? Now, these are executives of state corporations, major companies, members of powerful families, etc., etc. Okay? They have a lot of wealth tied up in Hong Kong. Now, if you look at any of the famous, powerful families in the Chinese ruling circle, all of them would have at least one, maybe more, private equity funds in Hong Kong. Okay? And these are vehicles which receives the wealth coming from their families and relatives in China to be invested locally and then in other places in the world as well. Okay? So these operate out of Hong Kong, but the money comes from China, right? Recently, perhaps in the last several years, because of the USA insistence on financial control against terrorism, it has become very difficult for money to go from Hong Kong, even Hong Kong, to other Western countries. All of them have to be reported in detail. The source of the money, how was it made? Was it a result of your hard work and labor, or was it made something? And all these questions have to be asked and answered before money could be deposited in a bank in the Western world today. Okay? So money from China is going to Hong Kong. Originally, they want to be diverted and to overseas, but now it has become very difficult for the money to go outside. So money, the pool in Hong Kong is getting bigger and bigger, right? Now, if one day Hong Kong is ruined by something like, a disturbance of the order of the February 28th event in Taiwan, all that money could evaporate, right? It would be disastrous for them. So they themselves have at least some stakes in the continuing stability of Hong Kong. So paradoxically, this red capital, which people in Hong Kong are all afraid of, may, in the final analysis, provide some guarantee of stability. Okay? Now, this is, of course, my personal judgment. It may not hold water, right? But I hope that it works.
Yes. So, do you see the end of the 50 years change promise as an opportunity for Hong Kong to systematically or entirely change, in particular in the political system in a positive way, or as a threat or crisis for Hong Kong? Is the central government to invade Hong Kong?
For the people of Hong Kong, I think the real ordeal, the real crisis in their well-being would be the year 2047 and not 1997. 1997 was an overture. Already done. Okay? At first it wasn't so bad, now it's getting worse. The true event of importance to the people of Hong Kong will be 2047. Okay? That significant fact was not well understood by people of my generation, which in 30 years' time will be all gone. Right? And any political degradation going forward from now on, bit by bit, probably would not affect people in my generation that much. But it is going to affect the younger generation most. The accumulation of all the degradations, the entire process, the end result would be felt by the current young generations. It is their problem. That is why they are so anxious, they're so frightened, and so angry about their situation, about the degradation process that they are now beginning to witness. Now, probably 15 years before the year 2047, when the promise of 50 years no change would end, China would renegotiate a new deal with the people of Hong Kong. But remember, when the original deal for the basic law was negotiated, it was between China and a relatively powerful Britain. And the result was the basic law, which did guarantee a high degree of economy, universal suffrage, democratization, personal liberties, Hongkongers rule Hong Kong, and all that. In the next round of negotiations for the fate of Hong Kong going beyond 2047, who will be the negotiators standing in to represent the welfare of the Hong Kong people? Who? You don't know. Britain is out, right? So it's a very, very frightful scenario for the young people in Hong Kong. And that tension is going to cause a lot of confrontations, struggles between the government in Hong Kong and the Beijing supporters on one hand and the people of Hong Kong on the other. And you're not going to see very smooth sailing going forward. Right?
So here. May I request a Chinese translation? Thank you. 多謝李元璋先生你頭先咁一個咁大嘅 picture 俾我睇到啦。咁其實我想因為我經歷過啦，係雨傘革命啦，同埋有區選嘅。我想問一下咧，其實你頭先所講嘅話 negotiation power， 咁其實我哋可以喺香港裏邊點樣可以做得到一個更加廣闊嘅 negotiation power， 同埋呢一個 group 呢個 community 應該係點樣去做嘅？第二樣嘢就係我想知道有關於嚟緊9月份嘅立法會選舉，其實你會覺得我哋香港人有幾 hopeless 喺嚟緊個選舉度？因為其實而家我哋年初一新正頭咧，就已經有一咁大件事啦嚇。咁喺呢一個咁嘅情況底下，我哋9月份嗰個立法會選舉係會有幾 hopeless 喺50年不變嘅呢個情況底下，15年已經變到係
人唔似人，香港唔似香港，同埋好多人都想去翻做 BNO 啦。我希望阿練乙錚先生可以咧喺呢度去講反映翻下，其實你對呢15年或者係我嚟緊之後喺立法會選舉會係有啲乜嘢更加重大嘅情況去轉變嘅？唔該晒。
So the first, if I listened correctly, the first problem question was what bargaining power does the Hong Kong people have? And the second one is the hopelessness of the upcoming legislature elections. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
The upcoming legislature election in Hong Kong probably would not have a very strong bearing on how events would turn out to be for the run-up to 2047. But it would be significant in deciding the progress of certain legislative efforts of the government, namely the Article 23 legislation on national security. Of course, there are other implications of the outcome. For instance, if the Pan-Democrats could not hold on to a critical minority sufficient to muster votes for overturning vetoing legislations, then they probably would lose a lot of other powers in the legislative process, such as libel, filibustering, etc. Right? So that would be critical. And a failure there to achieve the minimum number of seats in the legislature will spell trouble for the next 10, 12 years, probably more. But I think there is a good chance that the Pan-Democrats can hold the line. If anything, the turnout of the district council election last November, a year after the Occupy movement, there were significant gains by the younger generation of voter representatives. And so come September, when even more youngsters reach voting age, I think the situation could improve. Now, of course, with the commotion that happened on Monday night, in which violence was committed on both sides, that would be a wild card. And would the people in Hong Kong blame the chaos on the part of the young participants in the so-called disturbance? I don't know. If a sufficient number of people vote against the pandemics as a result of that, then probably there would be trouble. So it is very much in the balance, and I don't have a crystal ball.
All right. This question might be a little odd. I saw originally before the start of this lecture some points on the PowerPoint, and since you have given us a very long lesson on history, especially regarding the Confucian concentric circle idea, one school of dissent that particularly capitalizes on Confucian theory is Professor Wang Chin's Paulist theory. And what I would be interested to hear from you, Professor Lian, about your view on whether this theory has relevance in affecting the militancy or the popularity of Hong Kong citizens at large into the participation of the dissent that's going on right now. And whether that gives a new frame of legitimacy or a different objective towards the greater struggle for Hong Kong's autonomy, which has been in the past largely been guided by Western principles of freedom and democracy. This is a completely new way of expressing things. So what do you see from there?
As militancy and the use of violence are big issues these days in Hong Kong. Since the commotion that occurred on Monday night, the democratic parties had come out to denounce the demonstrators for resorting to violence. And that leaves the young rebels in a very isolated state, rather helpless. Okay. Now, it is quite interesting to note that Hong Kong probably is the only place in the world in the last 100 years in which there was a major political contest with a Leninist Communist Party on one side, in which the people in general nevertheless think that violence should not be used. If you look at history anywhere in the world in which there has been or there was a contest for power between a Leninist Communist Party and another party, whether it was ruling or whether it was in opposition, there was always violence, bloodshed. Okay? But in Hong Kong, so far, there has been none of that, right? There is a very strong emphasis of peaceful endeavors, peaceful political struggles, okay? Avoidance of violence in Hong Kong, okay? That I find quite surprising. Given that Hong Kong has a very strong Chinese culture. Now, the Chinese culture is not peace-oriented. If you look at Confucianism, right? If you look at Confucianism, at its very origin, were two extremely bloody, violent events. The overthrow of two despots, dictators. Okay? The first one was Tong Fat Kit, the second one was Mo Wang Fat Zhao. Okay? Collectively, these were known as the Tong Mo Gap Ming. Okay? In the Book of Changes, let me see if I can find the quote. You would see very interesting comments by the ancient Chinese people, the Confucianists, and it's illuminating of how they view. I can find it. Essentially, it says something like this. I can read from the quote. 天地隔而四時成，當冇革命，順乎天而應乎人，革之時而大矣哉。This in English. Making revolutions in all times. The Tang and the Wu revolutions are absolutely according to the wishes of heaven and the people on earth. So the meaning, the significance of revolution is great. Now this was at the very beginning of the Confucian tradition. So two very bloody events characterized that beginning, and it was celebrated in one of the most important holy books of Confucianism, right? And afterwards, the saints of the Confucian tradition all extolled that particular, those two particular events. They were bloody events, right? So given that those two bloody events right at the beginning of the Confucian tradition in the Chinese culture, it really surprises me that the people in Hong Kong are so peace-oriented, so averse to violence. Now, I'm not saying I'm for violence. I want to encourage violence. None of that. What I'm saying is, when faced with a certain kind of hopelessness and high-handed treatment by the government, some elements in some of the younger people in Hong Kong have resorted to violence. That may not be wise at all. But I think to immediately denounce them and disown them, the pan-democratic parties are a little bit cruel. I hope they get better treatment.
Actually, I have a question for new model of supply and demand aspects. So you mentioned that the change has occurred during the years from preference for economic increase, coming out to pay a cost for economy only by perhaps this $1 So my question is, it seems to me that resorting to violence isn't actually paying a price for economy because the government of China doesn't care about violence. It's not something that they're willing to accept as payment for economy. So my question is, what can Hong Kong actually do in order to pay for autonomy? That's the first question. The second question is to get a model. In the Google model right now, it seems pretty fair to say that the government of China plays the role of unwilling to give in to autonomy when clearly one should benefit from it. But if we were to expand the scope of the model, and model not ask for equilibrium, but ask social choice problem, where the social planner is the Communist Party, and where the agents of the society are different provinces, different entities of China, then perhaps you can think of it as distributing autonomy to Hong Kong not as being beneficial for the whole society, because then other provinces might also want to gain higher autonomy, perhaps hurting the economy, as we know, China, by creating less autonomy for these provinces is actually a good way to just for public planning to boost the economy. So I'm just wondering what you think of the second model and what you think of the first question. The first question was. So the first question concerns how exactly can Hong Kong pay for autonomy? Because we know that violence and protest isn't something that the government of China is willing to accept as payments. There's no value in that. So what are some positive payments we can get instead of paper payments?
Work. I am not very optimistic, but pursuing the same logic, the original logic that led to the Occupy movement, there might be a way out. And that is, and that logic is the following: if enough pressure is put onto the economic system, the economy, especially the financial sector, as to cause a major disturbance, then the capitalist class in Hong Kong would feel the pain. And they would then pressure the government to make concessions. And that would perhaps meet some of the demands of the people. And so that was the very original idea of the Occupy movement. Of course, that principle got watered down. Originally, it was proposed that demonstrations would be conducted in Central, right in front of the financial markets. Okay, block all the streets there, and stop the market and freeze everything, so that Hong Kong as a financial center would come to a standstill. Right? Now that was watered down. That was not pursued. Right? I think perhaps implicit behind the logic of militancy pursued by some of the groups in Hong Kong is the same thing. Okay? If we rock the boat sufficiently, these finance moguls would be affected, and if sufficiently so, they would persuade the central government, which also has personal stakes, other kinds of stakes in Hong Kong. Okay. And if enough pressure is applied that way, maybe they will come to their senses and try to make peace with the people of Hong Kong by giving them more autonomy. If they understand that excess demand for autonomy is the real cause of social unrest. Right? So there may be a way out, but I'm not sure that the rulers in Beijing have that kind of sensitivity or sophistication or wisdom to understand and pursue. Oh, I think that's the second question.
It's okay, we can move on to other questions.
So first of all, I want to state that I believe most of you come from Hong Kong, and I want to say that I'm a mainlander. I come from Guangzhou, and because after all these Hong Kong events, I did researches on, say, economy and city planning, and also some on international politics. But then I have something to say, then I will have a question. The first thing is, from my perspective, from the first line cities from China, we do estimate that Hong Kong have a trend to fall to the second-class economic cities in China. So in the mainlanders' eyes, we are comparing a city to a whole nation. So now, after we're talking about politics, so we have two systems between Hong Kong and mainland, but then we cannot compare a city to a whole country. I think that's one of the ideas that we have some mistakes in talking about the Hong Kong issue. And secondly, treating the political events in Hong Kong, as we know, there are some anti-visitors and anti-tourism events, right? As we all know. And personally, the most 90s or 80s in China or Generation X, Chinese and mainlanders, we are extremely not competent. This system and the central government is not self-competent. So it is fear of any confront to the system. Which is why, well, I or we, to be offensive to represent some of my people, might have a trend that Beijing might lose its patience. Well, maybe not short, but in 10 or 20 years of riots, possible riots like this, it is possible that we cannot even reach the 50-year guarantee. This is possible. So what I want to ask is how, in a peaceful way, or in how likely do you think can Hong Kong prevent this trend to dry out Beijing's patience? Because it's not just about Beijing. Personally, it's not just about the central government and Hong Kong anymore. It's about two regions. Well, obviously, I'm not sure how many of you have been to Shenzhen. That's a city beside Hong Kong, right? And most people in that city, and most of my friends, most 90s and Generation X, they are even more patriotic than some of the inlanders. Even though they are beside Hong Kong, they have very different political views to people in Hong Kong. So it is possible that down to the citizens, up to the central government in China, that there will be pressure to stop the, to respect the 50-year guarantee. How likely do you think Hong Kong can prevent this drying out of patience?
Is there a question?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do that. Another thing too, well, this question, which might make it easier for you to answer, is that we shouldn't see China as a whole thing. And when we are discussing, sometimes we say that the Chinese Communist Party is blah, blah, blah. But we have to realize that opinions differs in China, and opinions differs in the Communist Party. There's not a mainstream opinion. So not necessarily every communist is a left wing or a leftist. Some of them are neutral. People like this premier, he is a representative. He is sort of a representative of the neutral. So when I'm asking this question, saying how likely can Hong Kong prevent drying out the patients, is actually also a question of how likely will this, how likely can you prevent this to dry out the patients for the left wings and for the militarists in the party? It's not involved. Well, not necessarily militarists, but the conservatives. Let's make it simple. The conservatives in the Communist Party.
The question of the party's patience running out, and how to prevent it from occurring too soon, right? Well, I guess we in Hong Kong do not have a very good understanding of the psychology of the party leaders. But the current guess probably was there probably is no way to stop whatever the party leaders want to do in Hong Kong. No way whatsoever. So these young rebels are thinking along the following lines. If peaceful methods in the last 30 years had failed to achieve anything significant or achieve anything at all, and not only that, we in Hong Kong are losing some of the good things that we used to be able to enjoy bit by bit. Wouldn't it be at least possible that trying a different tact could achieve something that up to now have been inachievable? Okay. And that was a militant approach. And with all the dynamics that approach might entail, as I had explained them, right? So it is like a shot in the dark. It's like, in boat racing, and if you know a little bit about the boat racing, you're sailing boat racing. If you are trailing behind the leader a lot, then you should not try to follow it, because in the same direction, the winds would be the same to each boat. If there is a lead of that distance, that lead will persist. So what you do is you change a different tack and hope that the wind changes with you. All right? Now that provides a slim chance of success. So I think the people in Hong Kong, especially the younger generation, they more or less have lost hope of achieving anything positive under the existing leadership of the pan-democratic parties. So they want to try a different tact. It may well not work, and may even worsen the situation with great personal losses to them, to themselves, right? But some of them are thinking that may be our only hope. So I think they are thinking along that line rather than trying to divine the mentality, the thinking of the leaders. The second question?
I just wanted to check, did that cover both questions?
Well, but maybe we can have some further discussions after this, because it's a very general topic. I don't want to waste all of everybody's time. So.
That's actually a good segue. I think we have time for one more question, but after we're done, I welcome everyone to come up here and we can actually sort of open the floor, discuss with each other, and have it a bit more informal, because we do still have some time. So one last question. I guess we'll go second from the wall. It's hard to say. Integration. Me? Yes.
Can I? May I use my? Can I speak in Cantonese? 頭先練先生你講到就係話，將來你覺得會有一個climax of 嗰個 confrontation， 即係會有一個即係所謂嘅衝突嘅高峰啦。即係你即係頭先你咁樣講，你覺得呢個所謂衝突嘅高峰係喺乜嘢情況下會發生啦？同埋即係幾時會發生？同埋你覺得以後即係發生咗禮拜一呢一個魚蛋革命之後，武勇抗爭會唔會成為社會嘅主流咧？因為實際上其實武勇抗爭嘅成效係有所即係大家係有目共睹嘅喎。即係本土民主連線可能好多人知道啦。之前反水貨客，佢哋去踢嗰啲大陸人嘅篋啦。佢哋去鬧佢哋啲人運水貨啦，係好暴力，係好唔啱嘅，係好唔啱嘅，係好凍啊！呢個高地，不過唔緊要。但係喺呢個之後，香港政府的而且確係改簽咗，即係由呢個一周多行變咗做即係一簽一行嘅啫喎。咁即係呢個會唔會成為一個常態咧？同埋練先生，你覺得最後一個問題就係、是、你覺得10年之後香港係會點嘅樣嘅咧？即係多謝你。
用翻呢個英文啦，你自己。
First of all， 沒有英文唔係幾好。My first question is, Mr. Lian, you mentioned about there will be a climax of confrontations. What under what condition, under what situation would that climax, would that confrontation reach the climax that many Hongkongers will rebel and against the government in any means they could? Second of all, the effort of the radical groups is very obvious that it has some sort of effective response from the government by using a degree of violations. Violence. Do you see that would be a mainstream way for many activists or political groups in Hong Kong as a way to struggle with the government? The third question of mine is, what is your vision? What is your imagination of Hong Kong in 10 years, which is 2026?
Okay. The efficacy of militant tactics. You mentioned at least in one instance it was fruitful. The government responded positively and tried to ameliorate the situation, right? Now, I am not as optimistic as that, especially going forward. First of all, after the fishbowl revolution, I guarantee you that a lot of the militants would be in jail. That attrition alone would make it impossible for the militant movement to sustain itself at the current level. So, one may have to wait for several years, if at all, for the movement to recover. Now that would be my first reaction, my guess so far. Now, of course, I may be surprised by events. Okay, the young people could be sufficiently infuriated that more and more of them would join the movement, but I don't have a very firm belief in that. So it may have succeeded once, okay, but further successes would be quite hard to come by, and probably not very soon. Okay. The second question was when will the next high point in confrontation come about, and under what circumstances? Now I hesitate to give a firm answer to this, but given the volatility, it could flare up on totally unexpected ways. Like this time it's over fish balls, right? I would imagine that, such a local delicacy or earthy, item could spark a social disturbance of that magnitude. I don't know, but I think certainly if things continue to worsen at this rate, it wouldn't take 5 years. It wouldn't take 5 years. Well within the duration of this administration, if Mr. Lian gets a second term. 10 years time? I would be dead. I really cannot answer that question. Maybe it's up to the imagination of the younger people. Throughout the Occupy movement and the year or so afterwards, there has been a schism, a gap, a divide between the older generation and the younger generation in the opposition, right? And complaint coming from the older generation is that these young people are too unruly. They don't listen to our advices. They are going out of their minds. They get making things worse. And so such thinking is preventing the two sides to get closer and cooperate better. But I think older people, especially in the leadership positions of the pan-democratic parties, should come to the following understanding. The future belongs to the younger generation. Whether it's a good future or whether it's a bad future, it's their future. by 2047, all of these current leaders will be dead, right? And those left behind to face the music would be the young generations now, right? So whatever they do, whatever they choose is going to affect them more. So they have the future in front of them. It's their interest to make the right decisions as they see fit. Now, older people like me or like the democratic leaders, they should just stand aside. I really think so. They should just stand aside and let the younger generation take over. For good, for better, for worse, it's their future. Let them make it.
Thank you.